Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the latest peer-to-peer webinar. I'm just going to do a quick check. I know I've been on here with Les already, but presumably everybody can hear and see me. We get a thumbs up or something from the crowd is always appreciated. Perfect. Take it. So yeah, as I said, welcome to the peer-to-peer webinar. This is the first one since, I believe, September of last year, as we were going through transitionary phases, but it's great to have it back up and running. Before I pass it over to Les, I will just go through some housekeeping items. So first thing, as we posted, this webinar is delivered solely in English. However, if people want to be exposed to some new tricks, Les is presenting in PowerPoint Live. So you should be able to see at the bottom of your PowerPoint on the screen, 3 dots, which will allow you to click in if you so desire, and you can translate the slides to pretty much any language of your choice, but French being the more typical one. Similarly, if you are watching in on your ECN, your forces teams, you will have access to translation or live transcription into the language of your choice as well. That capacity is not currently available on the CFMWS site. From my perspective, it is fantastic to have Les involved, as well as a lot of people online, so thank you for joining us. Les is going to present on the talent ID matrix and the skills and wills matrix, skill and will matrix. I won't take over too much of his presentation. I just have a few bits to add. I've seen Les present this on our PSP coordinator course before, and that's where the idea came from. And it was yeah, great presentation. So I hope you all enjoy it. From a perspective, we will be talking a lot about whether it's employee engagement and training and development and onboarding. It is important to remember with that we're simply sharing ideas and discussion points here. This is not the only way to do it or the one way to do it. And we do recommend that maybe some of the stuff that we discussed during the webinar is something that you would engage with your local HR or management on should things become an issue. And similarly, we will be speaking a lot about, as I said, staffing, but it's also an opportunity to look at these matrices and think about a bit of self-reflection and where we sit on them, because I know I've been doing that since Les presented it to me and we went through this most recently. So if anyone or if no one has any questions, I will pass it over to Les, who will introduce himself and then get this underway. Thank you, Les.
Good morning, and thanks for everybody for joining this. This is kind of my first kick at the can at doing a presentation like this, so bear with me. Sometimes technology and buttons, I'm not as used to Teams as some other people are, but we'll get through it. Kind of a bit of background on this particular presentation. As Gary had mentioned, I was involved in a coordinator's course, which was very kind of staff oriented. My current role is the sports coordinator here at Borden, and I'm a staff of 1. So I didn't really have a lot of background in PSP dealing with staff, but I'll go through a bit of my background, and for my presentation, I tried to combine kind of my past experiences and pull it in and do a presentation based on some of my past experiences and kind of put this all together, and this is what kind of came out of it. So I think it's just a little bit important, just give you a little bit of background on me so you know where I'm kind of pulling some of this information from. Originally, I graduated from Brock University with an honors degree in physical education. I was looking to go to Teachers College and become a phys ed teacher, but unfortunately, Teachers College wasn't in the cards for me at that point in time. So I ended up heading down to East Tennessee State, where I received a master's in exercise physiology. At East Tennessee State is kind of when I got into coaching. When I was at East Tennessee State, I was a track and field coach in the NCAA, and I was also a distance coach in the NAIA. And I also was a strength and conditioning coach for the NCAA and women's softball and women's volleyball. I spent 7 years at East Tennessee. I worked as a fitness coordinator in the recreation department along with some of my coaching. And eventually I needed to move closer to home for personal reasons, and I just missed Canada. So I ended up coming back to my alma mater and got a job as the intramural coordinator. And I was also the men's rugby coach at Brock. I spent 9 years at Brock, and during my tenure at Brock, I really got into coaching. I, again, was the coach at the Brock University men's team, got into coaching some club rugby, provincial rugby, eventually moving into some regional, national, and then international. I was coaching the under 17 program for Canada at the time. Following my tenure at Brock, after about 9 years there, I moved into the role as a high performance manager with Rugby Canada in 2010. Um, this was a really kind of exciting time. We at Rugby Canada had just been found out that sevens was going to be an Olympic sport. So during my tenure at Rugby Canada, I did a lot of work with OTP, Sports Canada, World Rugby, all trying to gear up for the Olympics. And it was kind of in this period in time where I became fascinated with talent identification and athlete development and how complex and how um, inaccurate sometimes talent identification is. And that's kind of what really got me going in that particular area. And that's kind of where we're starting this presentation, is that whole talent ID, athlete development area. And then in 2016, I received my advanced coaching diploma. It's kind of the old level 5 through the NCCP. It's all the theoretical piece of that. In 2018, I had left Rugby Canada and I started with PSP. I was originally the assistant for the National Sports Office, where I helped run national championships. From there, there were some funding issues. I moved into kind of the sports stores here at Borden as a full-time role. And then our sports coordinator left and I applied, and that's kind of brings you up to where I am today as the sports coordinator here at Borden. So that's kind of a little background on myself and kind of that high performance piece that's in my background kind of really kind of weaves in and out of this performance, or sorry, into this presentation. And hopefully we can draw some of my high performance background and provide some, at least some thoughts for you guys on how to maybe look at things differently or go from there. Just to kind of give you a little bit more kind of context to this presentation, the talent ID matrix and the skill will matrix doesn't give you a lot. I just want to kind of outline to you guys through the presentation what exactly is the talent ID matrix, what are some of the pros and cons, and how could a talent ID matrix be applied to yourself with CFMWS, PSP, whether you're in fitness, whether you're in sport, whether you're in any different area, can this be used in your particular area? And then we'll move into the skill will matrix. What is it? How do you map people out? And then once you kind of get people mapped out in the skill will matrix, what are some strategies for dealing with each quadrant? So I'm going to get into the talent ID matrix at this point in time. It's pretty simple. With the talent ID matrix, you basically look at performance. Are you a low performer and a high performer? And you would map the individual somewhere there. But again, in the high performance world, just trying to figure out how to get to the next one. Gary? There it is. You're mapping the individual on performance, but you're also mapping the individual on the potential. So again, moving forward, you might have a situation where there's your map. And I'm going to take a simple kind of example with this map. and we're going to talk maybe a little bit about 100 meters sprint time. So in this scenario, you've got here a low performer and low potential. This particular individual is myself. I'm 52 years old and I run the 100 meters in about 20 seconds. Well, in the whole talent ID matrix, I'm pretty low performer and I'm a pretty low potential at my age. But then you might have a situation here, and this particular individual has pretty low performance, but has a high potential. Could be an individual that just ran the 100 meters in 12 seconds, but that individual might be a U9 athlete that has just actually broken the world U9 100-meter record. So again, the performance isn't great, but the potential is high for that individual. You might have a situation where you've got a high school student who's running a 10-1. And then we get into the other interesting pieces here. This could be Usain Bolt, world's fastest man. He holds the world record, but he's retired. His performance is very, very high, but his potential is about the same as mine because he's stepped away from the sport and he's moved on. And then up in here, you might have his name just escapes me. Laura Niles, the Olympic champion from this year, last year, fairly young. He's the Olympic champion. He probably has another quadrennial, maybe 2 quadrennials left. So his performance is very high and his potential is very high. So when you start to map this out, you end up kind of dealing with a situation where you've got these 4 kind of quadrants that kind of map things out and go from there. The example I just used is the 100 meters. Pretty simple. You are looking at a time. If I run 19 seconds and an Olympic athlete runs 9 seconds in the 100 meters, it's pretty easy to say that the person running 9 seconds is faster and better than the person that runs 19 seconds. Simply, it also applies to like long jump or high jump or throwing. Any situation where it's just one measure to determine performance, it works out fairly well. The problem with the ID or the talent ID matrix is how do you start mapping people out when you're dealing with, for example, a team sport, a hockey player, a basketball player, a baseball player. The biggest thing there is there's so many multiple skills involved in evaluating that athlete. It becomes very difficult to simply put them down. You look at somebody like a Shaquille O'Neal, right? He's a high performer, but let's talk about his free throws. Well, he's not a high performer in free throws. He's down here. So how does his performance actually map out? And what is important to that particular sport? I know when I was with rugby, we did some stuff, and they were called IPPs, individual performance plans. And we basically looked at each athlete in 6 major areas. We looked at their technical proficiency, their tactical knowledge and awareness. We looked at their physical attributes, and then their nutritional understanding, their mental approach to the game, and then again a holistic or leadership type component as well. But within each of those different areas, we also had about 5 or 6 different areas within there. So for example, in the technical area, we might look at the catch and pass, ball carrying, tackle, kind of those different things. But then again, you start looking at the athlete and you have to look at what position they play. In hockey, a forward has different responsibilities than a defenseman, and a defenseman has different responsibilities and technical skills than a goaltender. So each different position would have a different kind of mapping of their technical skills to get an idea on that. And same with tactical and physical and nutritional and mental and the whole bit. So just by quickly talking about some of this, it becomes quite difficult when you're looking at that multi-skilled athlete that has to perform multiple skills to have a high performance. How do they get mapped out into the talent ID matrix? So the interesting piece for me that's kind of the high performance part. How can you take a look at this particular matrix and have it apply to our day-to-day lives? Working within CFMWS and PSP. So you start looking at it, and what I did is I looked at it from the recruiting standpoint or the hiring standpoint, and I simply pulled out my actual job description. But when you start looking at, are we dealing with 100-meter sprinters, or are we dealing with a rugby player or a basketball player? I would kind of start to think that when we are dealing with this situation, we're kind of dealing with that basketball player, the rugby player, the multi-skilled, just based on my job description and most of our job descriptions. The first thing when we're trying to map out performance and potential, we need to look at the basically the shared competencies, the client focus piece, the organization knowledge, the communication, the innovation, the teamwork, and then the leadership piece. So all of a sudden, we've already got these variables where this might actually be one person. You're looking at that might be their client focus. Maybe up here is their leadership. Maybe that's innovation. Maybe that is teamwork. And the picture becomes a lot tougher to see. And that's only dealing with the shared competencies. If you look through any job description that's put out by CFMWS, the shared competencies are across the board, but then you've got other responsibilities. For example, on mine, plan, organize, and coordinate the operations and delivery of sports programs, monitor and evaluate sports programs, design sports programs in reflection of the fitness testing requirements, organize leagues. It becomes a lot more, we end up having a lot more little red stars all over the place. And with all those red stars, now we're trying to combine them into one. Am I here? Am I here? Do I actually fall here? So it's quite complex to try and get through a lot of this, but in the long run, I think it's actually quite valuable if you can get to see the clearer picture by kind of looking at those individual pieces. The other piece with the talent ID matrix is we did some work when I was involved in the kind of high performance world. Baker, Waddy, and myself presented an article in the circa 2016 high performance magazine. And what we had looked at is this whole high performance talent ID matrix. And what we found was that in these different, we divided our quadrants up and got a little bit more detailed, that if somebody falls into the gray squares, there's minimal error. So if you kind of go back to the example we had here, where I was used myself as an example, 52-year-old runs a 19-second, I have low potential and I'm an underperformer. I'm probably not making the Canadian Olympic 4x1 relay team. And there's a pretty good confidence that that is true. And then again, up here, this is like those outliers, those phenoms, the Sidney Crosbys, the Wayne Gretzky's, the Tom Brady's. They came up here and you kind of look at it and go, yeah, those guys are good. Everybody sees it and they become your superstars. So in these two areas, the risk of error is pretty low. Here, when you look at the blue squares, the risk of error becomes a little bit higher that you actually could make a mistake. The big thing for me to point out, and what we found, was these areas in green are the areas where you are most likely or have a high chance of an error. And when I talk about errors, I'm looking at the errors of basically research errors, the type 1, type 2 errors. I'll go to here. The type 1 is a false positive. We are predicting they are talented, but in the long run, it just doesn't turn out. And again, you're looking at the false negatives. you get disregard them, but in the long term, they would actually turn out to be the most talented. So again, going back here, this tends to be the, hey, these guys are awesome. We're going to use them because they're really high performers, but in the long run, they're not going to work out as well. And then up here, well, their performance isn't very good and they disregard the potential when actually this might end up being, and it was, the Tom Brady. Tom Brady was drafted very, very low because he was seen in kind of one of these areas. But in the long run, he had a fairly good career. So it's kind of interesting when you start really looking at a particular map like this, and where the possible errors could go. So again, you kind of looked at this right at the start and go, okay, we're going to go back to my 100-meter example. You have to choose a 4x1 team. Well, that's a pretty obvious choice. Let's take him. You know, this guy, good high performance, still has some potential. That's good. But again, choosing 100 meters, well, this guy, he's pretty good. But remember, that is possibly an error where we're saying it's a false positive, and we disregard these guys when actually in the long run, these guys might be the ones to join our team and medal. So kind of looking at that scenario, it kind of muddies the water, but gives the muddy water some clarification on where you could make mistakes and what the areas to really pay attention to when making some decisions on hiring, on team selection, that type of stuff. And again, looking through some of this scenarios, you know, in my opinion, only, but who would use this type of matrix to make some of the decisions? And you know, I guess my experience, particularly in the NCAA, but in the OUA, universities are doing this. They might not do this in a formal sense, but they are looking for and mapping every high school student in this kind of matrix and then going ahead. Again, these are the easy choices. But when you're looking at like the NCAA football, you're looking at a 16, 17-year-old high school kid that's eventually going to have to compete against a 20-year-old. Their performance probably isn't as high as that senior in university. So they're really trying to look at the potential of that individual. And that's when you start to get all your recruiting lists, your websites that have everybody ranked, your blue chips, your 5 stars. That's basically what they're doing in that sense. And I think the other piece that uses this maybe in an informal standpoint is every single professional team when it comes to drafting. They're kind of mapping out their individuals in the draft, trying to figure out who's going to fall where and what, and you know who's the best fit for their team. So I think the tool's used maybe in an informal sense, but it's used quite a bit through those different entities. But I think you'd also have corporations that would kind of use this similar thing moving forward and that type of stuff. So again, just kind of moving a little bit forward here, we did talk about the potential of the errors, and we also talked a little bit about the research errors. Maybe moving forward, I think just this next slide just shows maybe a practical application of the grid. I've changed the kind of parameters a little bit, but again, you're in the process of hiring one for one position. You've gone through, taken 2 people through your interview process, your screening process, and you end up with these 2 candidates. You know, one individual, absolutely great interview, knocked it out of the park, but their resume, references, skill set, maybe not quite as high as you want. And then here you've got a situation where, man, this person, they've got all the resume experience, references, skill set. They're great, but they just didn't have a good interview. You have to choose one of them. But again, after looking at some of the possibilities of error, you know, you're looking at a situation here where you might have an individual that shows a false positive, or you might have an individual here that shows a false negative. Maybe this is the best bet, even though, they didn't have a good interview. So the application of this particular piece is complicated, takes some time to get to the bottom of it, but it could be a useful tool once you get things mapped out. Um, Moving again forward, kind of to the next part of the presentation, looking at the skill will matrix. I found this particular matrix, I believe in like a business article. Um, but to me, the skill will matrix is the talent ID matrix in a lot of ways. What they've graphed with the skill will is basically the ability or the skill set of an individual. And then they've graphed the willingness of the individual to continue to learn. So I do see this as performance, and I do see this as potential. Um, but again, the skill will matrix kind of lays everything out in a very similar way to the talent ID matrix. What I like about this particular matrix is it provides you a pathway to move forward once you have people in there. Um, you know, Going back to our quadrants, obviously we have highly skilled people who have a real big willingness to continue to learn. These we've kind of referred to as the can and wills. These are your high performers. Ultimately, in the perfect world, this is where we would want everybody to be. We all know we don't live in the perfect world. Over here, you've got the um, low performers or low skill set, but the willingness to learn is through the roof. These are your can'ts, but are will and wills. These are your untrained individuals. These could be your new hires. They don't have the full skill set yet required to do their job, but they're still really willing to learn and take it all on. Down here, you have the can'ts and the won'ts. Being from a high performance world, remember, this is the group where I fell into for the 100 meters. I wasn't going to make the team. Pretty simple. In a perfect world, do we want to have these people exit? Sure, based on high performance, but that's not our world we live in. We might have individuals that are here that are important to our team and fill a role. We just need to continue to work with them. And of course, you have these groups here. They have high ability, but they just aren't willing to continue to learn and move forward. So that's kind of the situation. And again, I think it's also important to point out the next perspective. Once you have these people mapped, what do you do? If you have an individual that falls into the can't and won'ts, it's a tough category. I've gone from the should exit to, needs to exit to should exit. We don't have that opportunity just to cast people off like the Canadian relay team. We might need to keep these people and work with them. It's a tough category. They don't have the skill set. They're unmotivated to learn. But what's the game plan with these people? What can we do to help them? And just establishing clear roles and expectations, providing honest feedback. There might be an action plan. It might be simply that this particular person's in the wrong role. Maybe we just need to find a new role within the organization and they would automatically move from this quadrant to this quadrant. This is possibly an opportunity to engage HR. Is there a PIP involved? And I think it's case by case. But the neat thing about the skill will matrix is once we map people in here, now we have some tools or some direction to help them develop. Moving forward, you have the can't and wills. These are your new hires. They're super motivated, they're pumped, they've just started, they just don't have the skill set yet. This is the group where you provide that coaching, you provide that mentorship, frequent check-ins. Gary and I have had a lot of talk about this onboarding. It was quite a different experience for me moving into CFMWS and PSP. The military world is different. I'm still trying to figure out a lot of the acronyms. but having that onboarding and providing the information for these people to get them up to speed because they're sponges. They want to learn. They're ready to go. Um, so that group is good. Um, Here you've got your high performers. This group is kind of an interesting group because they're killing it, you know. But this is the group where we don't want to leave them alone because you can get into this group and without reinforcement and growth opportunities and providing the feedback for them, they could slide into a different group at any time. So this is the group again. You want to leave them alone because they're killing it, but spend time with that group and keep them there. For me, looking through this group that they can, but they just won't. Um, they might be bored with their role, but this group I think is can have a major impact on your team culture. It's this group that can drag things down. I'm not doing that. That's not the way we've done it before. It really can tax on your team culture. You know, for this particular group, what do they need? They need a new project. Provide them a 6-month goal. Maybe this is the group. You might have an individual that, yeah, they've got a high skill set, but this might be a PIP situation too, where HR gets involved and I anytime you talk about HR getting involved, people think about, well, I'm getting fired. But I think HR is a good opportunity to help develop that individual as well. So when we talk about engaging HR, it's not about trying to get them fired. It's about trying to help them improve as an employee moving forward. So the thing that I'd also like to highlight is don't forget about the type 1 and type 2 errors. You might find an individual up here and you're labeling them as, well, they don't have high ability, but just remember that they could simply be a false negative at the time. And same here. Oh, they've got all the skill set in the world, but it could be a false positive situation. So again, I think those errors and those caution errors areas in the matrix are something to take note of. What I really like about the skill will matrix is it's not as simple as just mapping people out and then that's done. You can start to look at the skill will matrix, and it allows us to start to come up with an individual plan for the individual to improve performance and help them out. I think these are great little pieces to add to those quadrants moving forward and getting them kind of almost starting their own IPP plan, an individual performance plan, so that they can start to develop as a worker. It seems like I kind of flew through it and all that, but I just had a couple of things as we kind of wrap up with the reflection piece of this presentation. What are some of the methods that you are currently using to evaluate new hires or current staff? I know we have our TPs and Core does a great job and My Talent, but is there any other tools that you guys are using to help evaluate that process? Would you consider incorporating the Talent ID matrix and or the Skill Will matrix as an evaluation tool moving forward? Hopefully you pick something up out of it and go from there. And then, could you use the Skill Will matrix to guide your staff development program? Looking back at this scenario, and you have people mapped out, that when you're doing staff development, you actually look at your training and kind of gear it towards each one of those particular quadrants in your skill will matrix. And then, of course, something to think about, what other applications could these matrices be used for? I was just kind of looking at it for an example. The skill will matrix might be a great application, could be an education system. You've got a grade 4 kid who has high academic skill set, but they're not interested in learning. Well, what are some of those tactics you could put into those quadrants and lay it out? But what I'm kind of curious to see if anybody else has any other applications for these particular matrices. So just kind of a few questions, just maybe to get you guys thinking. And obviously, I think at the end of this, we're going to have a chat together and get some thoughts from you guys. But just kind of, I'll bring these back up so you can kind of think about it. But that's kind of the end of my presentation. And wanted to thank everybody for coming, and hopefully you were able to grab a tidbit, a nugget to take with you and help you out in your day-to-day tasks.
Thank you very much, Les, for presenting. So yeah, and you did what I was going to ask, if you can pull them up. So with the settings for the webinar, I believe I have to unmute your mic or whatever. So with that in mind, does anybody have any thoughts or anything they would like to share? If you do, just raise your hand and I will open up your mic and we'll get a conversation going. And anybody who's seen me in a classroom or course will know I am happy to play the waiting game until someone speaks. So over to you guys. Don't all speak at once. Thank you, Abby. There you go. Let me see if I can do this quickly. Yeah, you should be able to allow mic, so you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Perfect.
I hope. There you go.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Les. Thank you, Gary. I was privileged to have seen this presentation during the coordinator course when this was facilitated the first time, and fantastic information to hear again. And I appreciated your time today. I think to answer some of those questions, methods that we are currently using, I definitely don't think anything this in depth. We definitely locally in Trenton use our talent performance tools, our My Talent tools. And I think that this type of talent ID matrix could absolutely help with giving opportunity within our current staff. So thinking in a ComRec environment where we have lots and lots of rec leaders, for example, using this kind of matrix to open opportunity for more responsibility and to kind of gauge where the potential and the performance is to then give more responsibility and opportunity to our team. So that is definitely something for me that I would consider using this for within our department when we already have staff, and then deciding who is in the best position to assign more responsibility or opportunity given their performance and skill, will, abilities. Yeah. Thanks again for today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for chiming in. Yeah, the floor is still open for anyone. You can interrupt me at any point. I think that's a great point, Abby. It's interesting because, you'll notice that too when you get into it. So our annual reviews, our performance reviews, although they're laid out differently, it's 6 things rated on a scale of 1 to 5. So if you reorder them in a matrix, they'll find a similar kind of result. But certainly that's it. That's what we talked about before we presented, or before Les presented, is just giving people opportunities and tools to think about. And as I said at the top as well, it may be ultimately thinking about where we put ourselves on, for example, a skill will matrix in terms of our different capacities and our job description. So definitely worthwhile. Harry-Ann, let me unmute you as well, unless it lets me. No, I got to allow it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Les. This was great. I just thought it was really good content because I also come from the sports background before I was with PSP, so I saw a lot of different things that I was familiar with, and I completely agree with the matrix itself. To me, what I always thought was tough to do was to maybe measure when you showed performance versus the ability, versus the willingness to learn. I always thought it was a hard thing to do, both for, let's say, as a coach, when you try and identify skills at, say, low age but high level sports, to pick that player that you want on the team and to cut the other ones. How do you measure that willingness to learn? And how can you, as you said, like, there's no guarantee, they might be a false positive, but like, what are the, I guess, the traits or the things you think are important to measure or ask or look for in order to make sure that your new hire or your new player has that trait? I don't know how to say that.
No, for sure. I think that's maybe one of the toughest questions is what am I measuring? And if what I am measuring is telling me what I want to know.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and that's a tough. It takes a lot of time. And again, we were going to talk about some of the pros and cons. I didn't put a particular slide in that said, hey, a con is, but
Mhm.
the tough part about some of these matrices is getting these stars in the right spot. Are you
Yeah.
measuring what you need to measure? That type of stuff. It's not an easy task. It seems simple. You're just basically plotting against two different variables, but for in the high performance world, this is not an easy task.
Mhm. And I think it may touch on the Abby's point as well, but it's like to identify some clear goals that you can come back to when evaluating either an employee or a player. Either way, it's like, what stats am I looking for, kind of? And I do feel like, for maybe that's my impression from the short period of time I've been with PSP as well. It's like, is there those specific measurements happening, on a long-term or even shorter-term basis? Like, do we have any specific tools in place and or ways to measure performance from our employee? And that's, other than what's available on my talent and whatsoever, that's what I'm not sure of, let's say. And I feel like there's improvements maybe to do on that end. Anyway, that were my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Ariane.
And I think you
Yeah,
bring up a good point too, in the sense of what am I looking for, but is it objective measurements or subjective measurements?
Yeah.
Are you looking at a simple 100-meter time where 10
Mhm.
seconds is faster than 11 seconds? Or are you looking at that kind of, well, I think that Gary has good soft skills for this job, but I don't really have any documented proof. It's more my opinion,
Feeling. Yeah.
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 And I think that's a big thing too when dealing with trying to evaluate, the objective versus the subjective.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you, Les.
thank you, Ariane. Thank you, Les. Yeah, and look, I'll always get the last word usually. So as a presenter, I think I'll take it anyway. One, I think, again, firstly, thank you, Les. A thought I had is just starting to do this is a positive in itself, rather than oftentimes it seems like too much to take on, so we don't do it, and then the positives, the feedback and the results that could come from it don't come. So it's definitely aspects of this, and the evaluation and the feedback are definitely worth doing. Again, I've said it a few times, but thank you, Les, for presenting. It was great to have it. As you'll be aware, so this video is recorded. It will actually be posted on YouTube just so everybody can access it. That YouTube link will then go on to the PSP Corner page. I think everyone is familiar with it at this point. They know where to go, but if anyone needs help, let me know. I also hope, I'm going to put the link, if that pastes. No, of course it doesn't. Give me one sec. There we go. I hope this presentation has also encouraged other people. So whether it's people online or anyone else who's going to see this afterwards, to register and put their names forward to present as part of peer-to-peer. So when this whole thing started, I mean, we've highlighted already, there's a lot of high willingness, high skill people in the organization, Les. So we want those people to share the knowledge that they have, whether that is, you know, something that's happening locally on your base that is different from everywhere else. Or I think in the case of like Les's one, is something that you're just genuinely passionate about, whether it's, you know, it may not seem linked to your role right now, but as we talked about, it can all come back and benefit the organization as a whole and be tied into our mission and our vision and our values. So yeah, please get it out there to register, and we'll continue this process with the webinars. The last thing I will ask before I shut up shop today is, if you are watching this presentation with anyone more than just yourself, i.e. so if there's 3 people in a room, can you just put the number in the chat? I used to be able to poll it, but it seems that Microsoft has decided that polls is no longer the right thing to do anymore, so they're trying something else. So just simply put the number in. If it's just yourself, you don't have to type anything. It's fine, because we'll just take it as an N of 1. So thanks everyone for attending. I hope you all have a good weekend, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you all again soon for the next peer-to-peer webinar. Take care and all the best.
Thank you, everyone.